Hey everyone, I am Kari the Mortician and I am here in the preparation room of a funeral home, and today we are going to talk about a dilemma that embalmers and funeral directors run into in the care centers or preparation rooms when they are caring for deceased. That dilemma is rings being stuck or so seated on someone's finger that they can't be removed very easily, or if not at all, without cutting them. This happens more often than you know, and it's not because the person maybe wore it always for so long, but it may be because of swelling or other conditions that happen right at the end of life that keeps that ring stuck on that finger. We find that rings may become stuck for one of three reasons. The first is because the person wore that ring for so long, whether it was their wedding ring, a mother's ring, a family ring, whatever it may be. Maybe they had that ring on for the majority of their lifetime. We care for people who've been married 50, 60, 70 years, and those rings are on their fingers. They never took them off. So it really just becomes a part of them truly. So to remove it takes a lot of effort. People do remove these rings once in a while because the deceased wanted to pass that down to the next generation, to their children, to their grandchildren, and they didn't want to be buried with those wedding rings even though they had worn them for so many years. Secondly, maybe the person has gotten a lot of edema or swelling in their final days or weeks. Often happens when someone is maybe in the hospital and they've been pumped full of fluids, and they retain a lot of fluid within their extremities and their legs and their arms, and their fingers plump up. This is going to keep that ring seated down on their finger as well. Third is when someone has a lot of arthritis. Maybe their knuckles swell, or their hands are maybe crimped in a position that their hands have been locked in for a long period of time. Ring Rescue is the company, and they have created a compression device which will compress the tissue so that you can then do the work to get the ring off. Now, this device is being used in emergency rooms, and it has started being used in funeral homes. And essentially, in a nutshell, it is like a little blood pressure cuff that works on pressure, and you place it on the finger above the ring and compress down that tissue. So especially with situations where you have edema, you can press that tissue in to make the finger smaller. Then you do the work to pull that ring off that finger once that tissue has changed its form because of the Ring Rescue compression device. So let's quickly talk about the steps in using the Ring Rescue compression device. So the first step is assessing the finger, looking at that finger. Now, does this look like something that has maybe set in recently? As they say at Ring Rescue, if the finger looks like it has been that size for over 2 weeks, that will change the steps we take. If it looks like something more recent, like a edema that has set in at the hospital, then that is going to lead us down a second path. So there's kind of two paths that we may go down. So 1 round versus 2 rounds of administering the device. This is going to be determined by what is causing the swelling. Is the swelling caused by edema, which is the fluid-based swelling, or is it a tissue-related swelling, For example, a weight gain. It is more difficult to compress tissue than it is to displace fluid. So, in order to get similar results, you will need to apply more rounds of pressure. For example, with edema, fluid is easier to displace with pressure. So 1 5-minute round should compress the tissue enough to remove the ring. Evaluate the finger and hand and repeat only if necessary. If the swelling is tissue related, it is more difficult to compress. Tissue can only be compressed so much. Begin with 2 5-minute rounds of compression back to back. Evaluate the finger and repeat if necessary again. The finger will be compressed 100% of the time. The extent the finger can be shrunk depends on the reason why the ring is stuck. Now, step 2, they recommend you put on gloves. Rings are super slippery. Worst thing could be is if, especially in the preparation room, we work around tables with sinks that are attached to them. So there's drains. Have you ever dropped a ring down a drain? Worst feeling in the world. You're then quickly ripping out pipes and trying to get to the ring before it goes into the never land of the drain system. So if you put on some gloves to give a little bit of traction to the removal, you can then grab the ring more easily when it comes off the finger. The next step is to move the ring as far down the finger of the deceased as you can so you have more room to place the device. You're gonna then place the device on the finger, the pressure cuff of the device on the finger. Do not put it over the ring. You're gonna put it right up next to it as close as you can. You wanna get as much tissue that's basically touching the ring from the outside as you can without being on top of the ring. Very important, you don't wanna be on top of the ring. So then with the pressure cuff on the finger, you adjust the dial in a clockwise motion, pump it up until you reach in the target zone, get it in the target zone until it's seated. You're gonna then place the hand in an upright position. So you would take the deceased hand and prop the hand up and leave that hand up for 5 minutes with that compression on it. You then release the pressure, take the pressure cuff off to see where that tissue is at. Next step, then once you remove the compression device and you see that unless it's arthritis or extreme weight gain, you are gonna have 100% of the time a compressed tissue area. So then you're gonna bust out this special lubricant. So a lot of lubricants you use hydrate tissue. Well, you don't wanna hydrate what you've just compressed. So this was created for this type of a situation, so you're not rehydrating and plumping up what you just compressed in. So you would apply this lubricant to then help you slide that jewelry off. So then the next step is jewelry removal. Ring Rescue does recommend different techniques to help you as you're trying to remove that ring. You can use the corkscrew technique where you twist it off, the rocker where you go top, bottom, top, bottom, top, bottom as you're pulling it off, or a combination, or some kind of counter pressure where you're pulling against the tissue with one hand, and you're kind of pulling the ring with the other. What we run into in the funeral home, and we really have to be careful with any technique we're using, especially when we were using string and things like that, is that tissue is so fragile a lot of the times with deceased. They may have been dead for a while, so that tissue is really soft. Because that tissue is so soft, worst scenario is that that tissue comes off of the finger as you're trying to remove that ring. And then you have a whole new problem that you're faced with and a much bigger dilemma. So preserving that tissue, keeping it intact, and making sure that no injury is coming to the deceased as we're removing rings is so important. When we're working with a deceased that has a lot of edema, what works really well to bring down the tissue swelling is embalming. We're able to counteract that swelling with certain chemicals, sometimes specialty chemicals, like this is a Democo from Dodge, and that will help the swelling that is created in the tissue. When we don't embalm, we don't have any way to retract that tissue. So the ring rescue device is one of those great things we can implement at the funeral home. So this works really well maybe on direct cremation situations where we're not going to be embalming, but the family wants us to get off the jewelry, but the rings are stuck, but we need to get that tissue down. So we would use this in those situations to retract and pull that tissue in. I talked about that there's two different paths that you may need to take with the ring rescue compression device. If it is a situation where you just have a little bit of swelling, or maybe the person had just worn the ring for a long time, you may only need a 5-minute rotation with the device on. However, you may need to take it off and then reapply for an additional 5 minutes. It's not a huge diverge in that path that you're on, but you just add more time for that compression device to be on, to give it more time to work, to slowly work in tighter and tighter, so you have more room for you to do the work to pull that ring off later. So at the end of the day, the ring rescue compression device has been found to definitely aid in compressing that tissue, so then I can do the ring removal. I know we all have our tips and our tricks that we share with others on removing rings, but wouldn't you have something in your arsenal that you could definitely whip out if you had one of those situations where you had to tell someone the only solution was cutting off a ring? Wouldn't it be great to lessen the amount of times we have to tell a family that? I hate cutting rings. I think it's the most heartbreaking thing that when someone's worn a ring for so long, we have to cut them. But if we could decrease the percentage of the amount of time that we have to tell a family that, why not? Wouldn't that be the greatest thing ever to not have to tell families that, like hardly ever? It just increases kind of our worth of what we do by lessening problems that maybe we have to tell a family we've run into. So we're creating solutions for ourselves in the back room, doing all the things we do, making a funeral a really good experience for the families we serve. So check out the ring rescue compression device, see what you think about it. Would love to hear your feedback. How else you think this device could be implemented? What other industries do you think could use this device in their arsenal? Hey everyone, so for a few weeks I've had the ring rescue on hand to be able to help remove rings if we had them stuck on the deceased. Definitely always compresses that tissue, helps to reduce the tissue in the finger so you can get that ring off more easily. The only thing is making sure I have it on hand. If you get to a church maybe and you don't have it right on hand when you need it. So that is making sure it's where you need it. It's with you when it's needed. So that's the only thing that as a funeral director, making sure I have what I need with me in every situation, or preparing ahead of time, knowing it might be a possibility. Also slowing myself down. I know that sometimes I get in the mode where I'm go, 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 but sometimes you have to have patience. And with this, it is very helpful, but you have to have patience for it. You have to wait your 5 minutes, sometimes 10 minutes to let it do its job. not always the thing that we're good at is having patience, is it? So having patience, making sure you have your equipment on hand you need are two things, just good advice in life in general, but with the ring rescue, definitely things you need. So give this a try, guys. Helps you at least save one ring, will be well worth it. So you don't have to tell a family you couldn't get a ring off. So check it out, the ring rescue.